All right. Well, welcome to our Kairos Network webinar. It has been so long since we've done one of these, but I was actually at the VoxCon conference and I heard this talk by Pastor James Cleland on AI. And let me tell you, I've heard a lot of podcasts on it. I've kind of started scratching the surface. His talk was the best talk I've ever heard on AI. Told me what it was, helped me understand it. I didn't feel like an idiot when I left his talk. But then also, he really showed me how I could practically use this tool. And after his talk, it might have been immediately, James, I came up and I was like, we have to share this in a webinar. And James was like, absolutely. So James, thank you for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. This is fun.
Yeah. Now, if you all are watching, we do it webinar style so that we can create a resource that we'll share out with you. So if you're enjoying the conversation, you can, of course, share that with your team. And you can also be a part of supporting webinars like this by supporting the Kairos Network. I'll drop something in the chat. But if you're watching this webinar live, you're a part of this webinar. So throw your questions in the chat if you have them. And then you can throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A. And as James and I are talking, I will work those in. I'll be throwing out some questions as well, but we want you to know this is not just something you have to sit back and watch, but I know you've got a lot of questions. That's why you've created space to be here live. And we want to make sure we dig into those things. So James, give us a little background here. You're associate pastor at St. Mark, but when it comes to AI, it's something you're utilizing in your ministry, but we just have to ask the question flat out, what is AI and how does it work?
Yeah, so I've been interested in AI for a very long time, since I was a kid. And 1988 or so, 85 or so, my dad brought home a computer from his work to our house, and there was a program on it called Zork. And Zork was like the first role-playing game on a computer, except it didn't have graphics. All it had was text. So it would describe the room you're in, and then you had to type in using language what you wanted your character to do. And then it had scripted responses based on what you typed in. And they called it a natural language model. So basically, it's back then, it's the same thing it is now. You are feeding data into a machine, and the machine is using that data to generate something. And it hasn't changed since then. Now it's changed how it does it. It's
and I don't want to call you out. What year are we talking about here?
Oh man, 88 or so is when I first started playing. So I was like 5 or 6 years old. But then in high school, I was so intrigued with language model programming that I saved up a ton of money to buy the coolest calculator you can buy, the TI-92. And in 1996 or so, I got one, and I started making my own versions of Zork, where you had to escape high school. You had to sneak out of the high school. So it incorporated all the teachers in my school, et cetera. And I would sell that program to other kids to play on their computer or on their calculators. And it was a language model still too, but it was so difficult because how does a computer read language? Well, it has to assign a number to a word. So that's what I did. I put in every word I could think of and assigned unique token IDs to each word. And then you could do different things with that in a program. So if they typed in a sentence that happened to have 2 or 3 tokens I was looking for, it would trigger the right response in the game.
So AI, you're talking about your first dipping your toe in the water with AI in 88. And yet for most of us, we feel like AI is this brand new thing that just came about 12 months ago when they released ChatGPT. How long has this been around? And you said it's a similar thing. How is it similar today to what you were doing back then?
It's been around a long time. In fact, Alan Turing, one of the fathers of modern computing, theorized what it could do. And then they started to build machines that could actually do some computations and whatnot. So the idea of AI has been around since the 40s or 50s. And it's basically this. You've got a program, which is really just a formula. And lots of times we think of those programs as kind of a static thing. You put in something and something comes out. It does the same thing every time. You don't want bugs in your program. You want it to work the same every time.
Yeah.
But Alan Turing had the idea, what if a program could change itself and write its own code and respond to different stimuli, respond to different data, and create new ways of responding to that data? And that's what we have now, is we have programs that are rewriting their own code. And that seems a little bit scary because we're not the ones controlling it, right?
Yeah,
but
the images of Terminator pop up in my mind.
Yeah,
machines taking over, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
just talk to, like, what are the big fears? What are the realities right now? And where should we as the church sit with the technology like this?
Yeah, so I'm going to share some photos I used AI to make that I think illustrate some of these fears. So this first one, a robot priest behind a pulpit in a futuristic church in the style of a particular artist I like. This is kind of our fear that there's going to be this faceless robot taking over our jobs, and in particular in the church, we're worried about it doing the job of a pastor, maybe, or maybe we're worried, it could be a friendlier robot, but still we're worried about our people listening to something that's artificial. We're worried that the sacraments and real things are going to be replaced with artificial things. We're also worried that our people in our congregations are going to be more and more artificial because of this, that human interaction is going to fall by the wayside. And simply, a lot of us are just worried that there's going to be lazy pastors who use AI to write their sermons for them, and they're not going to be doing the work that they're supposed to do.
Which I think
there's a lot of fear.
I mean, some of those fears are not baseless. Like take the lazy pastor example. Like, I had a buddy who did all kinds of programming and stuff, and he was one of the first people to start introducing me to like ChatGPT and what it could do. He goes, "Oh yeah, you can use it for all kinds of things." So, programming background, not a theological background. He goes, "Let me show you." He emails me a sermon talking about AI using scriptural defense. I read through this sermon and I'm like, oh wow, this was actually decently solid, like, based sermon with like scriptural references that are actually applied correctly. And so, I mean, I hear that and I think, some of our fears of like, okay, some pastor is going to, figure out how to do the 4-hour work week for ministry, and AI is just going to start spitting out their sermons.
Yeah, and there was a pastor in the Austin area who did a fully AI generated sermon, told his congregation that he was doing it, and read that sermon. And a lot of the feedback from the people in the interview I saw on the news was it was missing heart. It was missing the human element. Now, that's right now. Someday down the road, AI is going to get better and better at mimicking the human element, but it doesn't really know your people like you know your people. And I'm totally one for having real presence in your sermon in so many different ways. The real presence of Christ there in word and sacrament, but also like your personal element, your stories. I know one pastor who will feed his stories into AI and have it help him polish it, that kind of thing. I think that could be useful. But my real big thing is AI. It takes data, it gets trained on that data and goes through a prompt, and then it puts an output. But the way it gets trained is it gets feedback from human beings right now. And sometimes it's going to start getting feedback from other programs. But it uses feedback and mistakes and things like that to become better at what it does. But that's exactly how we learn too. So if we take ourselves out of the equation, if you allow AI to do the bulk of your work from beginning to end, you're not going to grow as a preacher. You're not going to grow as a teacher. You're not going to grow as on your faith walk. If you're outsourcing all of that, what are you going to do? Outsource prayer too? I mean, there's certain things we should be doing the bulk of, but I'm learning that AI can facilitate and help with that. It's really a problem when it becomes a crutch. Like, you don't have enough planning time, so you lean on AI. You're not really feeling into it right now, into ministry right now. You're kind of removing yourself from your congregation, and this is just another tool you're using to do that. That wouldn't be good either.
Yeah, and so talk to us, like, because I hear what you're saying on that side, and I think sometimes the fears drive us, and so we think, okay, this could happen. A pastor could use it like this, so we're not going to allow any kind of AI use whatsoever. Right. What are we going to lose out on if we take that blanket approach of just totally ignore AI, don't use it at all.
Yeah, well, I can show you some examples of things I've been doing, and I think they're beneficial to the church. The first one, I think AI is fun. I want to show you. Some of y'all might have seen some of these images before, but this is the prompt for this. You can probably guess is Jesus flipping over the tables in the temple. Right. So it's pretty funny. This one's been making the rounds. And so I put the prompt into Midjourney, which is one of the programs I use. And it just had fun images of Jesus doing fun things in the temple. It didn't understand really the prompt. It really didn't understand. And there's something fun there. But I mean, there's other fun things that can be done. I'm a total geek when it comes to Star Wars. So I had it make a Bayeux tapestry, a medieval tapestry based on Star Wars, and I use it as a background in my computer. That's fun, you know. I have a friend at a coffee shop near me, and he's really into Dungeons and Dragons, which is a game that I've been playing with kids for years. And Dungeons and Dragons is a good example of a tool that can be used for good or evil. Built into the system and the programming of Dungeons and Dragons are some really cool things you can do. And one of the things I love to do is write stories that take kids and adults on an adventure that teaches them a biblical truth. So this is his character he was telling me about. He was describing it to me one day. And as he was talking, I just started putting the description into Midjourney. And this is the image it popped out. And he turned to me and goes, "That's my character. That's him." I'm like, "Yeah, well, there you go. You can use that image." So it was a great connection tool for me. But then I started developing a campaign where his character and other characters are going to fight the 7 deadly sins, right? So we've got sloth here, and we've got greed, and all I did was describe the deadly sin and tell Midjourney and make me a monster based on that sin. The other really, really handy thing I use AI for is it helps me read the world. So I had AI write a new version of Psalm 23 for the modern teenager. And it completely changed the script. So it's reading everything that's out there that's been made available to it. It's reading posts from kids online. It's reading teenage novels. It's reading everything. So it said, "Through the hallways of high school, I navigate my backpack heavy with books and dreams. I trust in myself to find my way. Amidst the chaos of exams and friendships, I fear no teenage drama, for my friends stand by my side, and in their laughter, I find my calm. In the midst of this teenage journey, I'll discover who I am meant to be. My passions and talents will shine through." I think you're probably getting the point. The AI is reading the world, and this is what it thinks teenagers need. And we could give this to our kids and say, "Hey, this is a great, tool for you. Like this is a version of the Psalm that's for you." Or knowing that AI is reading the world with all of its flaws and sinful nature, we can use AI as a way to show the children the false narratives that are out there already. And that was really helpful.
Well, I think it's huge because, like, I was talking to another pastor earlier, and we were talking about this webinar coming up, and he made the point, and I loved this, that it used to be the mega church that had access to the research assistants that could go in and could do all this research to really say what's happening in the world and pull all these different things that a pastor could then utilize to in the preaching and teaching to help people understand where God's word's at and where the world's at. Well, now through AI, this tool that's reading the world around you, you can utilize it as a research assistant that's helping you pull in what is going on. What is the conversation? Not that I have to agree with that conversation.
Right.
But to just know what conversation is happening.
Right.
And to be able to do that within my normal bandwidth of ministry is huge.
Yeah, and typically I like to use data to show parents concepts and show people concepts, but data is even becoming something that people aren't really trusting in the same way. We still have made data an idol in so many different ways, but I started to think about, well, what are some of the other idols that we've made in America, the things that we worship? And I could tell people till I'm blue in the face that, man, we've turned politics into an idol, or we've turned entertainment into an idol, but I let AI do my work for me. So I put in the prompt, imagine the American God of Second Amendment rights and freedom. And so me in the past, I mean, I'm an NRA instructor. I know guns, all that stuff, but it's been an idol for me before. So that was the first one I popped in. And I thought it was pretty telling. I mean, these are the guys that I kind of want to be like, right? But there's one gentleman who popped up. I was like, oh, well, that's another thread that maybe we could follow, right? And so I've also put in another prompt of show me the God of American distraction and entertainment. And these are some really evil and enticing looking gods, aren't they? And again, there was a certain gentleman who popped up a second time, and I put in other prompts for American idols. And it was hard for me to then not see the trend that maybe in America we are propping up certain human beings and worshiping them. If this is what AI, after it reads the entire internet, gives us, then we might have some issues. The other thing I thought, well, let's turn that AI mirror a little closer to home. So I put in the prompt, show me a middle school student at a Lutheran high school in Houston. Lutheran middle school in Houston. And it popped out these kids who I think I know. I see them all the time. And we totally have them on our website and in flyers. I mean, it's just the quintessential, what we think of as middle school Christian school kid. But I started putting it in more and more again. I ran it about 50 times and I got over 100 images, and every single one was a white kid. And only about 2% or so were a white girl. So I'm not saying our school is like this. This is not what our school is like, but this is at least what's out in the world of what the world thinks a Christian school looks like. And that's something to be aware of. So then I put in—
break this down, what you're saying is like, I put this prompt in and I put it in several times, run it several times. And this is what AI is showing me the world thinks when I say Concordia Lutheran School in Houston.
Yes. Even if it's not true, this is what the world thinks. Or maybe we've contributed to this narrative with what we have put out in the world, because it's finding that information somewhere. So it might not be right now, but historically, as it trolls the internet and it gets all the data and reads the books, it thinks American Christians who go to a private school are white. But then, I put in—
what I hear you saying is that sometimes AI is the window that's going to allow us to see into the world. Sometimes it's the mirror that's going to allow us to see ourselves as the world sees.
Absolutely. And so I put in, you see the juxtaposition. I just wanted to make sure I had a good comparison. Well, I put in just public school in a public middle school in Houston, and this is what it turned out. Also kind of telling, a kid in a gas mask. I'm not sure what that's going on there for.
What's the deal with that one?
Yeah. So then I was like, well, let's look at some Lutherans. The prompt was a Lutheran family from Houston, Texas. Again, all white. Every time I did it, kind of creepy. Most of the time, not smiling. About 80% of the time, not smiling. But also, something for your viewers to notice. Look at these weird hands and things going on in some of these pictures. If you're ever wondering if it's AI or not, just look at the hands and arms. It has a real hard time with that. But then I juxtapose this with just show me a family from Houston, Texas. And this is more the reality. This is what I see as I walk around in my neighborhood. It's a little bit different than what I see when I go into some churches. And that kind of, that was eye-opening to me. To see some of that. So I use it as a mirror. I use it as a way to see what's going on in the world. It's great for that, but it's also just a beautiful tool for illustrating things for our people. I'll show you one example. I had a Bible study on Psalms, and I thought it'd be cool to go through Psalm 40 and just put in to the prompt into Midjourney verses from Psalm 40. So the prompt I used was, he drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. This is an AI generated image that shows Christ in the mud with his people, pulling them out. I don't know how it generated this exactly. I know it's reading all kinds of religious texts and all the books we've published at CPH. I mean, it somehow has gotten a hand of these things. It obviously read some Chad Bird too, because this is totally what he's been saying. It watches videos too on YouTube. I mean, it's doing some good preaching out there and doing something with it. He put a new song in my mouth. I mean, that's just a beautiful illustration of the Psalms to me. Burnt sacrifices are not what please. I mean, this guy has burnt everything, and it's just not enough. This one I love, Psalm 40, verse 12. Right now I can't see because I am surrounded by my troubles. My sins and shortcomings have caught up with me. I'm swimming in the darkness like the hairs on my head. So a lot of this was a great image we used in a Bible study where people saw it, and I just asked them, what do you think? Does this align with scripture? And they're like, yes, I was thinking Psalm 40 was about other people's sins surrounding me. But this gave me a new perspective that the sin I create, the things that grow out of me and my sinful nature are what follow me around everywhere. So, and that all came from just plugging into AI, you know.
We've got a couple great questions coming in here now. So Meredith asked, and I love this, how do we change the perspective?
Yeah.
So AI is giving us perspective. How do we change that? Or how do we get that to learn, hey, this is the world's perspective, but this is my perspective. Yeah. And I think that's where Meredith's going with it.
I've got, I mean, a couple of things. We can change the perspective on people about AI by using AI and showing them the beautiful things it can do. But then the flip side, if we want to change what AI is reading, we have to stop getting into a culture war, being culture combatants, and start being culture contributors. So we could fight everything that's out there and really just try to take it head on by disagreeing with everything that's out there. Or we could do what the church has done historically, which is jumping on technology really early and being at the forefront of it being used, setting the standard for what good use of that technology is, and being prolific in what we put out there. I think we're doing it to some extent because it's still reading beautiful things and creating some of those images from the Psalms, etc. But our greatest way to really influence culture and influence the reading of culture, which is what AI is doing, is being culture contributors in so many different ways, whether it's music or TV or art, even just recipes and conversations. We can start creating more. And that really, I mean, what's more Christian and vocational than creating things that reflect Christ's love and his light? So that's my biggest take on it.
If we want to change the conversation, we have to be willing to be in the conversation and not just critics of the conversation. Yeah. And I think you're starting to answer this. Penny was saying this, and I was listening to your answer, and you're hitting a lot of the points, but I want to see if you add anything. She said, if your school, denomination, fellowship of churches are being portrayed this way, how can you put out code data that changes that perception? And are we helpless against how we're portrayed to the world? Please answer with action steps, next steps. Thank you.
Yeah,
you can start to answer that well, like be a part of the conversation, like put things out there. But would there be anything else that you'd add to that based on that question?
I think part of the answer is when we're putting media out there, we're actually going to try to reflect who our people are. Now, there's an issue then. If you're a 95% white school and you have only 5% people of color, that doesn't mean you take that 5% and they're in every single thing you print and distribute. That would be disingenuous. What we really need to do is look at ourselves and say, why are we only 5%? Is this actually our community or not? What this helped me realize is that's not our community. What do we need to do as a church to be welcoming to the actual community we're in? It could be outreach things, it could be all kinds of stuff, but I think most of it's just pure and simple discipleship and loving the people we come across, whether it's in the grocery store, at church, at school, at work, wherever it is. You're going to see that your community looks a little different than your church. Well, then be in those places and be the church. Over time, that'll start to change. It's hard to have an action step, but if you're realizing your church is pretty multicultural, but you're still only doing a monolithic cultural experience, that's something you could definitely change in your printed material, in your style of worship, in all kinds of different ways. We as the LCMS, we got a German heritage, right? Does every party have to be German heritage? Probably not. Is there a way to do some cross-cultural versions? Absolutely. So as we do those things, I think AI will start to read different things.
I think I know how you're going to answer. There's a follow-up to that question, and then there's a really great question in before that's going to help us shift into the practical side. But the follow-up to that question is, should we have IT ministries that go right at these perceptions? And I think what you're saying is, what would you say to that?
I think we can do both, and we can take things head on, but I think that probably the biggest thing is to really do the mission we've been given, which is preach the gospel to all nations, especially the ones in our midst. And there were other, there's all kinds of different problems I saw that are backed up by data, but I saw them as I started to generate images. So obviously we got a problem in the church right now of idolizing politics. That's something we could take head on. We really could, in a loving way. So for me as a pastor, this gave me a lot of different things I could preach about and different threads I could pull. But I'd have to confirm that too with the actual people in my church. So again, I don't want to lean on AI to a point where I'm not having the conversations and having coffee with my people and actually hearing their stories. But I think it can go hand in hand. Yeah.
I love that. And I think, this is great as we're making this shift in. It's kind of like what I tell my kids. I'm like, when they're playing sports and there's the other kid that's like just talking, I was like, let your play do your talking. And I think sometimes we have to let our actions be the thing that start to change and drive things. But I think also being aware of how this stuff works and how it can play into our ministries is huge. In fact, I love this question Peter's written, and I think it's a great shift for us, because I think sometimes when I listen to these AI conversations, it's all like high in the sky, like where could this go, futuristic, and we don't really get the opportunity to say, just practical nuts and bolts. How can this help me do my job better? And so Peter asked this question: for an AI novice, where do we begin? What sites? What would be a couple of simple things to do or ask so we could learn about the region, context, where we serve, and ministry? So as you hear this question, like, man, let's use this as a pivot point to like, how can we use this very practically in our ministries? What are some things you're using?
Well, I can, why don't I just show you one of the things I'm using? Yeah, this one's pretty cool. Let me make it big.
Gotta love the magic of the screen sharing, right?
Magic of screen share. So I'm going to go to this screen. This is, okay, ignore the image for a second. I'll tell you the background. But this is a program called Discord. And kids use Discord to talk and chat a lot like we used to use AOL Messenger. But it has a lot of other features. You can video chat. You can do all kinds of different things. Well, one of the things you can do is you can subscribe to what's called Midjourney. And it's an AI robot, basically, that you can chat with. But its sole purpose is to create images. So I was at a pastor's conference yesterday, and someone was talking about the rise of the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, rise of the nuns. And I just thought that sounded so cool because I heard N-U-N-S. I was like, that sounds like a rock band from the 80s, the rise of the nuns. And I put into Discord to Midjourney, hey, design me an album cover for a band from the 80s called The Rise of the Nuns. And it did that right there. So why don't we play around a little bit? These are some images I did this week. This morning, I needed an illustration for chapel with the kids of the plague of the frogs in the book of Exodus. So I put in the prompt, let's see, what did I say? Thousands of frogs infesting ancient Egypt in front of Ramses' temple, right? And this is what it came up with. And that hit pretty hard with the kids. That was good. I also put in one, show me the Nile turned to blood. This one hit a little too hard. I don't think the kids ever really realized it would have been that much blood, right? But so it's kind of fun to do stuff like that. But why don't we see what it could look like if we did something right now? This is a fun one. I was going to play a game with y'all maybe, and is this a real or fake image? What do you think? Well, obviously I used Midjourney, but that looks real. I just said, give me an image of the Pope on some phones, right? So let me ask you this. Anyone in the chat box or Matt, what's an image y'all would like to see? And we can generate one right now.
Oh yeah. It's a first person to throw an image they want to see in the chat. I will give you that prompt.
Let's do it.
So I can play with one while you guys are throwing one in. Oh man, let's do okay, Martin Luther in a contemporary worship setting. That comes from Peter. That's a good one, Peter.
Let's see what it does. We might have to refine it. There's different parameters you can put if you learn them. So I'm going to change the aspect ratio. And let's see what it comes up with. It could be all over the place. So one of the things that I'm going to take off screen share for a second.
Yeah.
If I can remember how to do it. Here we go.
Just in case, that's probably safe,
Just in
right?
case. Yeah. But the way stable diffusion works, that's what Midjourney is. It uses stable diffusion. So what they did is they fed millions upon millions of images into Midjourney. And what they did was they attached some text that told you what that image was about. And then what they did is they diffused the image just a little bit. They took a few pixels and broke them up, jumbled them, or removed them. Okay, made it a little blurry. And they said to it, hey, fix this image. So they started with like 1% diffusion, and then the bot would fix it. And then human beings would rate it on whether or not it did a good job. Well, then it would scale up the diffusion to 5, 10% and start really messing up that painting, if you will. And then the robot would fix it based on everything it's learned, based on all the input it's been given by people, et cetera. And they did that time and time again, and it started to rewrite its own code so that it could basically fix images, to the point where they got to, they didn't give it an image to fix. They just gave it the text associated with images. And then it built an image, filling in all the blank space based on the text. So we've actually got some okay examples. It's a little different. We'd have to train it probably a little more, but let's see. So what it does is it gives us 4 images to choose from. And this is more a modern looking guy, kind of like Martin Luther. So what we would probably do is, if we wanted to run with this, we'd pick the image that best fits what we want. But we could decide, well, we need to give it a different prompt. Imagine Martin Luther in a futuristic church. And let's see what it does with that. So yeah, you still have to kind of craft what it's doing. There's a bit of art in the artificial. So it pretty quickly generates some images. You see it go. Yeah, this I think is going to give us something even better. But over time, you can tell it more things to do. You could say, I didn't like what you did in this area of the picture, fix that area. And these are just really great for sermon illustrations, because sometimes you've probably experienced this. You're on, there we go. There's Martin Luther in a more modern looking church. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, those are pretty nifty, and realize none of those have ever existed. These images have never existed before. And there's an element to this of randomness. So whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney or Bing is a thing you could use. If you go to Bing, it's free, and you can try different chat stuff, and you can try image generation. They're all generative AI. That's what we call it when it generates something. Bing is probably the place to start. Some of you might also be using Canva. It has all new features as of a couple weeks ago, where you can generate images or generate a document after giving it a text prompt. Those are some very useful tools that you can start playing around with. Bing is probably a good place to go, and it's free. I like to use some of the more advanced stuff. You have to pay for it, but it has a higher quality output because it's been training for a long time.
And so I think I'm going to give you one more here.
And
then as we do that, we're also going to discuss a couple other questions coming in on this. So it says, show me an image of a diverse culture around the altar for communion. And I like that prompt. So it's show me an image of a diverse culture around the altar for communion, because a couple questions are coming in here about, is this always going to generate Western culture images? Is it always going to give us prompts of, ethnically white people in these things? Or is that just because we're using AI here in the West, and if somebody were to use it elsewhere, it would be different?
So that is a great point. Again, it's reading the internet. And right now, the internet is very dominated by Western culture. So is the history of the written language in English, which is most of what it's reading. Now, it is starting to read more and more languages. It's actually figuring out how to read languages on its own, which is really cool. So it all depends on what you feed it. And the first thing we fed it were all of the things of Western civilization. So yes, it has a little bit of a cultural bias. Now, someone was showing me a prompt they gave it the other day. They were trying to get a picture of, I think, Martin Luther with a culturally diverse audience around him. And it took many, many different iterations of training it and giving it different prompts. It didn't naturally do that. But here we go. Here are some images. Wow, it's having a little bit of trouble with this because it doesn't quite understand what the communion table is. But let me show you, and I could train it over time.
And I like, so this process of using AI, we shouldn't always expect, whether we're talking Chat GPT or image generating programs, that the first thing I plug in is going to give me exactly what I want or need.
Right. It's not going to. So I told it to do a culturally diverse group of people gathering around a communion table. So it's getting a little bit confused, but this one looks like there's maybe a Jesus type guy with, culturally diverse group. This one looks a little more ancient. So, I mean, you would kind of refine it over time to get what you want. But I'm going to show y'all, I have a very similar image that I did for my presentation. I'll just show y'all that one. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I gave it the prompt of, well, I'll just show you. Let's see. I love Norman Rockwell. I just think Norman Rockwell is awesome. So I fed it the prompt, a family of robots gathered around a table eating artificial food. And isn't this kind of what we fear, that artificial intelligence is going to replace people? So I was like, well, let's put a face to it, But really, I think what we're really afraid of is this. A family distracted by devices, a family distracted by technology, when they're supposed to be communing together, they're distracted by the glow from their screens. So this was an AI generated image. It's actually a little bigger than this. I made it very widescreen, kind of like the Lord's Supper. And it was just beautiful. But yeah, their faces look a little weird once you zoom in. This looked better when I was zoomed out. But I did a Lord's Supper with a diverse audience at the dinner table. And it's pretty cool what it can do. But one of the things I want y'all to realize is when you zoom in close, all it can ever do is really mimic. It can't quite be as skilled as Norman Rockwell. So two of my favorite artists are Edward Hopper and Simon Stålenhag. And Edward Hopper has a very unique style. This is Nighthawks. It's in Chicago. He's all about light and space and color. He tells a story without telling the story, And then Simon Stålenhag is all about kind of that 1980s Steven Spielberg vibe, but with weird futuristic technology thrown in and aliens and that kind of thing. Well, I thought, what if the two of them combined? And that to me is just a pretty cool image, but it really doesn't tell the original story. It doesn't really have something to say like Edward Hopper did. Sesame Street in the style of Simon Stålenhag. It has to mimic things to create things. And in its mimicking, there's just something missing most of the time. It's just off. And I think we're the same way as human beings. Here's Moses and Jesus in the style of Wes Anderson. It's got them centered like Wes Anderson does, a palette like Wes Anderson uses. But it can only really mimic. Your story is just so important, and that's what I think is key to using all of this AI. The fear, we don't need to be fearful. We know the end. We know that AI is not what's in control of the world. We know how things will end. We know about the new kingdom. We trust in Christ's promises, and we don't need to fear technology. Like we've had technology in the church since the beginning. I mean, we were the first to really embrace using the Roman roads to spread the gospel. We were the first to embrace the technology of radio, of the printing press, of TV. In so many ways, this is the same. What we're fearful of is this seems to be an exponentially growing technology. And if that's the case, I
think that's huge what you're saying. And I think too, when I walked away from your talk, the big thing I took away, and the thing that really started me getting a little bit more catalytic on some of my own use of AI, was one, the Kairos Network, we have a small team, right? Doing a lot of our ministry stuff. So to be more efficient, but man, the way that you talked about AI, I saw it as a catalyst to spend less time in my office, trapped behind my computer,
Yeah.
and being able to connect with more people and connect
Yeah.
with more people with existing, what I'm going to call content. But if you think about it, like the task of preaching, for example, like I talk to preachers all the time. I'm like, how much time do you spend on your message? Right. And it's anywhere from 10 to 20 hours for a lot of guys. Right.
Yeah.
And it oftentimes is used as a one-time event. And yet what I found is some of the tools of AI are allowing you to take that one-time event and then create more
Yes.
content that's going to impact. And so
Yeah.
a couple of fun things, you inspired me. So a couple of fun things here
Ooh, what'd you
I'll
do?
share on the desktop is, you know, when we're in the network here, sorry, it got a little crazy on the desktop, so I'll pull some of this stuff down. But one of the things that we do here in the network is we do a lot of content. And so one, ChatGPT, we might talk about that later. I use a thing called Subtitle. And so when
Yeah.
I create little videos, it helps when you're on social media to caption them. Now, I don't have time to go in and caption a video, but what this does, it pulls my clip in, captions it out. So this is a clip from a message, captions it all out for me. I can go in and change it quickly to make sure it's right. But then the other thing that helps here on this AI side, I've got templates, so I can have existing templates of how I do it, make it look however I want it to look. Like here's our VoxCon template that we used, if I wanted to use that. And so it's quickly changing these things to the template I want. But the other thing it's doing, and this is where it's really been helpful, is it's giving me some social media captions based on my video. So I can say, hey, generate a title, use emojis, and it can give me different title options that will start to spit out. And then summaries of my video, social media posts. And what I found is the way they've summarized what I put together is better than what I would take a while trying to figure out and come up with. I've already created the content, so I didn't use AI to write a script. I wrote the script. It's just using what I wrote and then helping me republish it in a way that can make more of an impact. And then if you're an everyday preacher, this is one I found, Content Groove. I got a deal on AppSumo, lifetime deal, because I'm a sucker for the lifetime deal. It'll take an entire message. Like let's take this No Other Gods message we did for Church at 1002. And it spits out for me different clips from that message that are roughly the size of reels that I could then spit out on social media. And it's reading the whole text, and I can go in and refine these clips from this message by Ethan. I can refine that, save it up here, and then I've got a clip that I can then utilize on social media. And I didn't spend hours going through my message. I let this do it in about 5 minutes. So those are a couple tools that I've been using that you James, were my big inspiration. In fact, all our VoxCon clips came from using this program. We just plugged in your whole VoxCon talk, and it's like, here are 7 clips that you could use with James. So
yeah,
what are some tools
I
that you're using?
I've been using Pulpit AI. It's in the beta, but you can get in on it. And there's a couple other websites that do the same thing, where it will. I put in an MP3 of my sermon or a video of my sermon. It reads the whole thing and turns it into a transcript, then turns it into a summary, some bullet points if I want for social media or questions, discussion questions for people to discuss about the sermon. And also a 7-day devotional with scripture references that tie into the sermon. And it did an amazing job, which frees me up to do some other very important things like research my next sermon or spend time with people or whatever it is. So that's been helpful for me. I have to watch what it's doing, though. Sometimes what it puts out is not quite what I was trying to get at. But that tells me that maybe my sermon wasn't really communicating what I was hoping it to communicate.
Gotcha.
So that's been a huge helpful tool. I'll even do simple things like I'll show you this. This is a coloring sheet based on one of the Psalms. I think it was maybe Psalm 90. I had Midjourney make a coloring sheet and printed off a bunch of those for the kids that sometimes come to my Bible class, and actually the adults had fun with it. And that took literally 30 seconds. I don't have time to handcraft a coloring sheet for people to use. And there's some out there on various things, but I was trying to do something a little more esoteric, like the Psalms, and get them thinking. And this was really fun for them.
So this is a great question that Meredith's got for us. And then I think it'll help lead into the question that I've got for you. Meredith says, are there guides to teach people in ministry how to use it helpfully? And if not, let's create that guide right now.
Yeah. So I haven't been able to find too many guides. What's out there are a lot of things telling you not to use it. There's a lot of that. I've seen a lot of, from the church at least, I've seen some people telling how they use it, which is useful. But what's not really out there are some how-tos and daily just things for your use in ministry. And I'll start working on that. I'll do it with you. What I've been using is stuff from the quote unquote secular world. You know, the art of giving a TED Talk or a teacher or many of those other professions and vocations, holy vocations that are out there. We can learn from how they do things efficiently for ours. So I'll just research how to use it in a classroom, and that helps me out a lot, both in my Bible class, but also in my sermons. There are some different programs out there too that'll do things like help you make a PowerPoint and do a lot of the work behind that. So I started to just look at what's the business world doing, what's the secular, quote unquote, secular world doing, what are other vocations using AI for, and how can we, if they're not quite doing it in the name of the gospel, how can we redeem that and use that as a way to proclaim the gospel in the most efficient way possible and personal way?
Yeah, and I think that's huge. And I hear you all too asking for more resources. We're going to take every resource we've shared. James is sending me a list. I'll pull out a list. It'll be in our follow-up resource we're going to send you. But you know, I'm kind of just from hearing your talk, this conversation, you know, if I were to give just a one page, like, where should I use AI? Where should I not use it? What I'm hearing you say is, where are those auxiliary tasks that if you had time would add tremendous value, but would really pull you away from the primary focus of what you're doing? So like the way you did a kid's coloring sheet, the way you could create study guide resources through the sermon thing. What are some of those areas that you see? And then where are you a hard stop? I would never use AI to do this.
Yeah. So I go back to Paul's words to Timothy, you know, do the work of an evangelist. Okay. And he lists some different things it includes, and it all includes interacting with human beings, spending time in the word, applying that word faithfully, you know, law and gospel where it's needed, doing the work of an evangelist. Well, for me, creating a coloring sheet is ancillary to doing the work of an evangelist. To me, having images and a slideshow, ancillary. It's beautiful, it's extra stuff. But for me, writing my sermon for me, that is part of the work of an evangelist. For me, counseling other human beings, I am not going to outsource that to a chatbot. That is coming. People are working on that. That is not doing the work of an evangelist. And there might even be things that are pretty useful in a sermon once in a while. But what you'll find is you'll stagnate as a minister of God's word, as a disciple, if you're not doing the work of an evangelist. So spending time in the word, real presence, word and sacrament, getting to know other people and connecting with them, engaging with them and sharing the gospel should never be outsourced, and it really never will be. All AI can do is mimic. It is artificial. Real presence matters. If this can help me with real presence, wonderful. The other thing is, if we ignore it and don't use it at all, if we aren't transparent with our people when we use it and how we use it, they're not going to know how to identify it. Paul goes on to say that there's going to be false prophets, people who tell you the truths you want to hear and not the actual truth, right? Well, AI is going to be used to lead people astray. So we need to be at the forefront of it. We need to know how it works. We need to train our people on when we use it and how. If you happen to use a quote or a joke in your sermon that was AI written, let them know. If you use an image in your sermon that's AI generated, put the prompt on there, let them know. We need to train them on what it looks like, because there are those out there who are going to use artificial intelligence to lead our people astray in politics, in tech, in theology and all kinds of different things. And I'm already starting to see it. There's been different versions of the Lord's Prayer created using AI that have already made their rounds. I mean, there's things that our people, if they know what AI is and how it works, they're going to have a radar for those things. And that's part of our job, is to train them on that while proclaiming the gospel.
That's huge. Yeah, and I think, and this kind of goes to the last couple of questions that we've got, and then we'll share a couple other resources. One, Bob Scuderi asks, as a publisher, if we create an image with AI, can we copyright it?
Yeah, so these things are a little bit up in the air, which is why I'm of the opinion giving credit where credit's due on all things is important. So if I create an image and in the prompt I say do it in the style of Norman Rockwell, I'm going to say that. There are still some cases out there that are being litigated. You personally are not going to be held responsible. It's probably the the generative stuff that's going to do it. But for instance, my favorite artist right now is Simon Stalenhag, they obviously took all of his art and plugged it into Midjourney. So you can create new stuff in his style that's mimicking him that you could try to pass off as his. I'm not cool with that. Like, plagiarism is plagiarism, no matter what it is. But if attribution is attribution. So I think if we're using the same rules we would have for attribution of say a quote you heard in someone else's sermon or a book you're reading, whatever, I think we're going to be okay. And again, it's all about that transparency, and your people are going to love the transparency. They appreciate that. Remember, people right now are so weary of institutions, of technology, of being tricked. They don't like that. So if we're as just transparent as possible, it's not only going to protect you, it's going to protect them. And your relationship with them.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. So, like, for example, we have one question in here. Do you use AI to answer emails?
I don't, unless the email is a tangible thing they want. So, hey, we need a list of things that we're going to be doing in our next meeting. Sure, use ChatGPT to create a bullet point list of our priorities coming up, whatever. One of the things I've been working on this year is a lectionary for our school. So I wanted us to really walk through the Bible this year. Every chapel has a particular Bible story we're talking about. And I did a lot of research going on the internet and finding different resources for our teachers and for our families, and the different Bible verses I wanted everyone to memorize in a scalable version of that. I mean, I've been putting a ton of work into this thing as a resource to our families and parents. Well, out of that, because I did all that work gathering things together and really thinking about my gospel points, my different learning things that I want them to have, I then thought, well, I want to do a podcast for our families, a drive time podcast, so that on Monday mornings when they're driving to school, they'll hear our gospel statement for the week. They'll hear interviews with kids. They'll hear our Bible verse of the week, and we'll pray together, right? Well, that is so easy to do right now because I did all the work of creating that lectionary. A lot of the things I did in that lectionary, I could have used ChatGPT to create. Like, give me a gospel-focused statement on this story from the Bible. It could have done it for me, and I would have created a much more efficient, big document quicker. But doing that work has allowed me to then be more efficient in other things. And when I do create an image now for a chapel, I already have the statements I'm going to throw in there from the lectionary. It's easy. So there are certain things like responding to a human being in email. I want to be a human being. But if they're asking for something that is a little bit not about our relationship, sure, I might use ChatGPT to make something. For instance, we did some drinks at VoxCon, and I created a drink called the Lutheran, which I thought was really cool. I did a bunch of research on the right ratio for a cocktail. I did some research on some historical cocktails that have popped up with different churchy names. And there was one called the Presbyterian. And I thought, well, let's make a simplified version of the Presbyterian, just like, their doctrine's a little too complicated. Let's make a simplified one. And I called it the Lutheran. And it was really good. But I also had ChatGPT. I put into it, hey, we've got a conference coming up in Houston, Texas. It's about, preaching and teaching, yada, yada, yada. Give me a cocktail for that happy hour that evening. And it came up with a cocktail called the Houston Honeysuckle. It had Texas grapefruit juice in it, Texas honey, Texas vodka, Texas this, Texas that. It was really good. but it just wasn't quite there. It got me 90% of the way. It needed another, it can't taste. Chat GPT can't taste something and experience something. So, I thought the better drink was the one that had my research and thinking about the palate of our people, et cetera. The other one was fun too, and it filled in a gap, and I might do that in the future. Like I said, though,
Well, what I hear you saying, I think this is huge, is I think you need to understand how you're using it, why you're using it, and understand that it's not going to be a hard and fast rule for everybody. So like, to your example, I heard you make a determination when you're developing your lectionary, and your decision on the lectionary was, I'm going to develop this piece. This needs to be me. But then I'm going to let ChatGPT do some of these other pieces. We did something similar. We do a Be Christmas series every year. We're going to release it again this year. And we always do an Advent challenge. And I came up with the last Advent challenge, and I was like, I want this to be fresh. So I developed the sermon series, but then with it, I want to do an Advent challenge. So I said, ChatGPT, give me a good Advent challenge that are going to help people love their neighbor and share Jesus at Christmas, Advent. Give me one for every single day. It spit out a calendar of stuff that would have taken me several hours to do. It spit it out. But then what I did is I read through it and I said, okay, does this make sense? I can adjust here or there. I don't have to take it as is. I can change it. And so there's certain resources like that that you might use that help you get people into the word. I said, hey, give me a lectionary. Give me a daily lectionary over Advent. Use Series B and give me daily readings in the Lutheran lectionary. And it spit out daily readings that we could focus on. And so, knowing where you can use it and where you can't, I use it for some of my content, but I don't use it to write my content, because for me, that's that line. I'm like, I don't want it to say, spit out 10 mission insights that I can share with people. I want those to be authentic and thought out. And, it's like the drink thing. I want that to be the thing I've tasted and I know it's good, but then I want AI to help me create all the auxiliary things that would take me so much time I wouldn't have time to think about or record the next mission insight.
Yep, I did the same thing this morning. I'm working on our Advent dinner Bible study for families, and I've just run out of ideas on discussion questions for at the table and fun things to do at the dinner table, because I try to give some fun elements and fellowship elements. And I asked I finally gave in. I was like, ChatGPT, give me some fun activities to do around the dinner table during the holiday season. And it gave me 20. Some of them were silly. Some of them got me thinking about other things, and some were just ready to go. I didn't need to sit there for an hour and worry about that, but I can then filter that and plug it into where it goes. So, and that's probably the biggest thing is AI works by taking data through a prompt, and then it's got it generates something, right? Well, that's what we've been doing as pastors and teachers and parents for all time. We've got the world, all the data that's out there, and we're in the middle, and we're deciding what should then be given to our people. And we better be using a gospel-focused lens and filter, and then those producibles to our people. If you remove yourself from that equation and they're just going to AI for stuff when it comes to the gospel, we're going to be in trouble. Or if you aren't doing the job of an evangelist and aren't really filtering the things you're creating and putting them in the right narrative, then we're failing too. But that's the same with every technology we've had in the church: printing press, radio, TV, internet, all of those things. That's always been key. And it's all, when it comes down to it, a technology. And I said this in the conference, there was a technology that was created that was super evil. It was a torture device, right?
Yeah.
And God redeemed that. He used the cross for the ultimate good. And he can use AI. He can use you and AI for beautiful, amazing things, just like he did the cross, just like he's done with every other technology. And we don't have to be afraid that this one is exponentially getting quicker, faster, smarter, all those things. It doesn't change how powerful God is and how he uses things and you.
That's huge. So I'm going to give you one last question. I want to honor people's time. I just, thank you, one, for digging into this. We will share a follow-up resource. You'll have all kinds of things you can play with. But James Kent here asked a really great question. Are AI tools for generating textual items like calendar discussion questions different from the ones that are doing images? And I want to piggyback on that question. What if somebody's watching this webinar, they haven't tried AI, they're in ministry, what are the top one or two pieces of AI they should try first
Yeah.
So
my recommendations is don't start off with a mission with AI. Just have some fun. And I would start with Chat GPT first, because you can talk to it and it'll generate different things, and just say things like, hey, create a story for my kids tonight about a monkey named Susan and a lion named Billy. And it'll do it.
yeah.
So have fun with Chat GPT. I would also say find an image generation AI, Midjourney, or just Bing, and play around with creating. I like to take the dreams I've had. That was the first thing I did. Is I had a dream last night and I had a hard time describing it. I described it to AI and it created an image, and that was beautiful and fun. So I would say have fun first. What was the other part of the question? Sorry.
Yeah, and I think I think you definitely answered it. It's like, where would you start? And start by having fun. Start by using some of those things. And I think too, I like that. And I think where I would start too is like, where do you have existing content, and how could you use some fun AI tools to create new content that could help give that new life? Like some of the sermon generation ones, like you mentioned, and we'll put it in the thing, Pulpit AI, I believe is what you used. And there's some other things like Content Groove and Subtitle, and so we'll put some of those in there, but that's huge. Yeah.
Just have fun. And then as you realize what it can do, you'll see potential for it and plugging it in. It's nothing to be afraid of, but you need to be aware of it and respect it, and what could be done with it. That's important.
That's huge. Well, James, I thank you so much for taking your time in the midst of your busy week and just walking us through AI. We're going to have James' info in the follow-up resource, so you can connect with him and see some of the stuff that he's doing with AI. We're going to share some of those resources as well. But thank you for being a part of this. And I'm sure we're going to have a follow-up conversation around this. And of course, if you have questions about AI, if you want to see us dig into certain topics like this that are affecting you in ministry, reach out, shoot me an email, matt@theKairosNetwork.com. We love doing webinars. We love creating resources that are going to help you in ministry learn how to share the unchanging gospel in an ever-changing world. And so, James, thank you for helping us do that. Really appreciate your time today on this webinar.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.